Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Returning early from her business trip, the woman overheard a conversation from a random fellow traveler. Realizing it was about her husband, she decided to follow her. "Goodbye, Aunt Amelia," Gaston managed to shout one last time as he stood on the threshold of the compartment. Gabriel immediately pushed him aside, jumped twice, waved his hand, and cheerfully promised, "See you, Aunt Amelia." "Bye, bye," Amelia responded, probably for the 10th time, still trying to smile pleasantly. "Sorry for the trouble, Amelia." At the threshold stood the twins' mother, Irene, folding her hands and bowing like a Japanese person. "Thanks a lot for your understanding. I wish you quieter travel companions for the rest of the trip." Irene calmly grabbed a twin in each hand, and within a minute they all three rolled out onto the platform, where their father, broad, tall, and bearded, was waiting. Upon seeing him, both energetic boys seemed to slow down. Amelia stood by the window until the train departed, just to make sure neither Gaston nor Gabriel jumped back into the car. Oh, it seems the danger has passed. Now, she would be content to read for about 10 minutes, lying on her upper bunk, and then fall asleep until morning, which in this case was the same as getting home. It seemed lucky that she was traveling alone for now. The next big station would only be at night, and the chances of someone joining her at the smaller stations were low. The summer vacation season was over, and the route wasn't touristy. Amelia stood in the middle of the compartment, blissfully stretching, and suddenly heard a female voice behind her. "Good evening." Amelia turned around. In front of her stood a fragile, nimble, charming woman, about the same age as her, slightly shorter, with long loose hair of an interesting straw color, and quick, friendly eyes. The fellow traveler immediately closed the doors and rolled a compact wheeled suitcase almost to Amelia's feet, explaining, "I'll put it in the luggage compartment in 5 minutes, just need to get out some dinner first. My appetite doubles on the road, so I baked 3 pies with cottage cheese and cherries. Though the cherries are frozen, there are no fresh ones available right now. I won't be modest, these pies turn out delicious, and we'll have a little feast before bed. Eating on the road doesn't make you fat, tested. What's your name?" "Amelia," Amelia answered melancholically, clearly understanding that a quiet, sleepy evening with a book was no longer possible. Well, she had to see the bright side. After all, interacting with a friendly adult fellow traveler would tire her much less than the wild Indian cries of energetic 5-year-olds Gaston and Gabriel, and pies were one of Amelia's weaknesses. The only small issue was that Amelia gains weight from eating, whether on the road or anywhere else, while this happy lady seemed to be able to eat whenever and wherever she wanted without affecting her figure. "I'm Lola," the fellow traveler announced joyfully, tossing her hair. "My full name is Dolores, but Lola is more familiar, that's what everyone calls me. Amelia, you can start slicing the pies, and I'll go get some hot water. I also have some nice tea bags with me. It would be great if we could travel together the whole way. When all the seats in a compartment are occupied, there's always at least one bore among the 4 who ruins everyone's enjoyment of the trip." Lola flashed a bright smile and immediately darted out the door. Amelia watched her leave with calm gratitude. How nice, the fellow traveler had taken an immediate liking to her. Amelia actually considered herself a bit of a bore. Her husband often told her that she liked to be a stickler, and colleagues would stop their cheerful gossip when she arrived. When everyone speculated about who the boss would send on a business trip to a new project, authoritative whispers of Lilia from the advertising department echoed down the corridor. "The good girl Amelia is going, I'd bet a pastry on it." Amelia wasn't offended by the giggling behind her back, she was more surprised. What was so funny about being responsible about work? However, she had finished her tasks at the new project efficiently, was heading home 2 whole days earlier, and the boss allowed her to rest and sleep in for those 2 days without going straight to the office. "Just don't tell anyone, please," he asked her over the phone. Amelia promised to keep quiet, though she would have done so without promises. It's a shame that Manuel Perez is considered a stiff. He's actually a very understanding person, it's just that people in management tend to look for faults. Lola returned with 2 cups of hot water and praised. "Oh, how appetizing my pies are sliced." Emilia was different from many other women in that she was little interested in other people's lives. "Everyone's life is pretty much the same," her mother used to say, and Emilia had grown accustomed to believing it. Indeed, the women who loved personal conversations at work discussed more or less the same issues. Emilia usually remained silent. Who would be interested in her mundane life? Lola's pies were truly exceptional. They practically melted in the mouth. Such masterpieces are created when someone has a light touch. Perhaps thanks to the magical pies, Lola's story about her own life did not weigh on Emilia at all. "I came home to my mom to heal my heart," Lola shared with a confidential smile as the rhythmic clacking of the wheels continued. "I thought I'd stay for a year and then return to the hustle and bustle of the big city, but I ended up staying in my hometown for half a lifetime. If someone had told me before, I wouldn't have believed it. Mom begged me to stay. She was good at begging. She said that my older sister was busy with her family, that her husband didn't really like her, and she was lonely, and that she needed me. I thought, and am I needed anywhere else? I couldn't think of anything and stayed with Mom. I won't be modest. I'm a good hairdresser. I quickly grasped needs and wishes. The earnings were stable, and I even visited regular clients at their homes, so some people in our little town will miss me. They've gotten used to me. And I myself unknowingly slowed down. I wasn't planning to change anything, thought I had grown up. But it turned out I was very wrong. When Mom passed away, I immediately felt the urge to change my life. We held a memorial for Mom with my sister, as it should be, to not offend anyone. Mom cared about that. And once all the important people for her had paid their respects and left, I looked around and found no one. My sister has her own life, worries about her children, endless grievances against her husband. There's no special affection between us. It's expected for close relatives to communicate, so we do. I didn't come up with anything. The idea of renting out my apartment and returning to the city of my youth just came to me. My sister didn't even try to dissuade me. She promised to check in on my tenants, thanks to her. Listening to Lola's pleasant, melodic voice, Emilia quietly wondered. She was absolutely convinced that such charming women, open to interacting with anyone, always find themselves in the midst of interesting events, loved everywhere, awaited everywhere, yet Lola, with a touch of sadness, claimed that her surroundings were empty. And isn't it strange to return to a city that once brought disappointment? It was completely unclear, even quite odd. But you're not going blindly, are you? Emilia asked with genuine interest. You've probably already found housing or a job. Yes, a little bit of both, Lola nodded. I rented a room from an old acquaintance and will work with her for now. She was looking for a replacement. The owner of the beauty salon trusts her opinion. Good, you won't be alone after all, Emilia approved. We're not friends, Lola drew an invisible circle in the air with her hand, just a mutually beneficial arrangement. But everything is clear and predictable. There's also another person. My mind boils when I try to imagine how our meeting will go. He promised to meet me at the station tomorrow, take me for breakfast at a cafe, and then take me to my rental apartment. We haven't seen each other for so many years that it feels somehow absurd to even consider us acquaintances. Maybe it wasn't necessary to tell him that I'd be living in the same city and the same neighborhood again, but I couldn't resist. All these silly hopes, maybe something good will happen. My sister thinks that as people age, they only get worse, but I doubt it's that simple. For example, I've lost weight with age, stopped using bright colors, and getting upset over trifles. I won't be modest, I like myself. Emilia nodded approvingly, feeling a slight pang of envy. She liked herself less and less each year. Aren't you tired of my chattering? Lola asked with genuine interest, as it seemed to Emilia. No, on the contrary, Emilia assured, suddenly imagining how uncomfortable it would be to be silent together in the confined space of the compartment. Moreover, she had an unfamiliar feeling. It seemed that if Lola kept talking, she would reveal something important. Am I delving into mysticism? Emilia tried to laugh at herself. This is something new. Meanwhile, Lola, having found a grateful listener, clearly wanted to share what was on her mind. She blew on the cool tea for some reason and confessed, "I believe in the effect of a random fellow traveler. It's always interesting to hear the perspective of someone completely different from yourself. Isn't it?" "I don't know, maybe," Amelia replied cautiously, as she didn't like to lie. Even with close friends, she found honest conversations difficult, let alone with strangers. She always felt that her thoughts and feelings might seem silly to others. "My situation is like the saying, old love never rusts." Lola began to get to the heart of her story. "I moved to your city after school to live with my paternal grandmother. By then, my parents had been divorced for 5 years. My father had forgotten about me. He started a new family and had new children. But my grandmother and I got along great. Of course, I could have found a hairdressing college closer to my mom, but I wanted to move to a lively city, away from her control. If she had tried to boss me around, it would have been easier for me to do things my own way. But she was the kindest, softest person and afraid of everything. It's hardest for me to upset people like that. If I had stayed home, Mom would definitely have gone gray before her time. Thanks to the local gossipers, she would hear about my girlish escapades before I even got home in the evening. Something had to be done, so I left. Of course, I lied with a serious face, saying I found a very prestigious college, the best in 3 regions. And Grandma Olivia was a completely different person in her youth than my mom. She could steal a boyfriend from a friend and had affairs with married men. I could discuss anything with her, like with a peer. "Yes, lucky you," Amelia unexpectedly said out loud. She had always found it best to stay quiet in her own family if she even thought of saying something wrong. "Yeah, that's how I planned it. I'd spread my wings at Grandma's," Lola laughed softly. "But actually, I didn't do anything scandalous. I studied and spent my free time with a group that a college friend introduced me to. Half the girls and guys there were her classmates. We went to discos, traveled outdoors, just like everyone else. Studying came easily to me. I immediately felt it was my thing. I won various contests and found a job right after college, not in the worst place. The salon was new and not well known, but it was in a good location and stylish. And on my very first day at work, I met what I thought was the love of my life. The guy just came in for a haircut, older than me, tall, athletic, and dark-skinned. Not to say he was exceptionally handsome, but appearance never mattered much to me. I perceive a person as a whole, not just externally. The main thing was that I immediately realized I hadn't met anyone like him before. Our crowd was pretty much the same: auto mechanics, electricians, one drove an armored vehicle, fun, not too tactful, with similar interests. After 6 months of hanging out, I could predict exactly how each of them would act in various situations. I considered myself very perceptive, and my friends thought so too. I gave advice with an authoritative demeanor. I made friends easily and naturally, just like with Roll. Although, it was the first time I was nervous meeting someone, though I didn't show it. He was polite, not very talkative, and had a clever sense of humor. I chatted with him about all sorts of trivial things while cutting his hair, and I wondered whether he was interested or not, nervously trying not to mess up the haircut. My hands felt like they weren't mine, half numb, touching him and feeling nervous as if it were my first time touching a guy. So, I had already imagined him as a noble knight, and when he even asked for my phone number, I was over the moon. Thanks to Raoul, the salon owner respected me from day 1. It was a hectic day, full of clients, and I was new, a kid, but I worked calmly and quickly, and everyone was satisfied. That meeting overshadowed everything else for a long time. Everything else seemed trivial and easily solved. By the way, I didn't even consider that Raoul might have wanted my number just to book an appointment. "Oh, let me go get some more tea." Lola easily jumped up, grabbing the empty cups on the way, and it was as if a breeze carried her out of the compartment. She seemed too energetic to sit still for long. Amelia suddenly vividly imagined Lola spinning like a top at work, with men watching her with interested glances. Emilia's own husband, also named Raoul, always watched lively, graceful women, even if they weren't particularly beautiful. Emilia often noticed that Raoul was attracted to women who were completely different from his own wife. And the next day, during my lunch break, Raoul called. "Can you believe it?" He asked when I finished work and if I wanted to go for a walk. I tried my best not to show how pleased I was, even giggling that I would be starving after work and wouldn't be up for a walk. And my knight seriously assured me that he wouldn't even think of suggesting a walk on an empty stomach. Of course, we'd have dinner first, and he'd show me an interesting restaurant, thinking I'd like it. That's how we started seeing each other, as if someone up above wrote a happy, light script and we were just following it. I usually rambled about silly things, while Raoul said little but interesting things. He had finished university, studying technical subjects related to water communications, which was like Chinese to me, but he was generally well-rounded and interested in many things. Now, I question what such a man might find interesting about me, but back then, I didn't even think of it, so confident was I. He was thoughtful, reserved, and composed, while I was cheerful and impulsive, just as Grandma Olivia used to say. By the way, Grandma Olivia claimed that guys like him are magnetically attracted to girls like me. But, interestingly, Grandma didn't expect that I'd fall so seriously in love. She thought I was still too young and silly for serious feelings and plans. But I knew for sure, I loved Raoul, and he loved me. I don't know why it didn't alarm me that he never promised anything, didn't talk about the future, or introduce me to his parents. I only wanted to see the good. If there were a contest for the most naive optimist, I would have won it for sure. And I'd enter a competition for the biggest pessimist, maybe the very biggest one, Emilia confessed with a shy smile, starting to like the idea of being an accidental companion. "Oh, so we both have something to work on learning to avoid extremes," Lola continued. So, we kept seeing each other. Raoul still stayed silent about future plans. But I started to feel without any reason that he would soon talk about the most important thing. I was sure he'd propose to me any day now. And Grandma Olivia was backing me up. "He'll propose soon. I've got an eye for these things." Well, it turned out Grandma's eye wasn't very sharp, she was nearsighted. One fine day, a lady came into our salon, exuding modest elegance, age hard to determine, her hair styled meticulously. I walked past the reception desk, and she asked for me, Lola. The receptionist waved her hand in my direction and said, "Here's our Dolores, our universal stylist." The lady came over to me and sweetly said, "Hello, Dolores. Could you spare me a few minutes? It's a personal matter." I was taken aback, thinking she wanted to inquire about a husband or something. You never know, sometimes jealous wives track down where their husbands have been, checking alibis. I replied, "Sure, let's go to a quiet place." We had a cozy corner in the salon for waiting. Clients chatted there, had tea and coffee. We sat down there. The lady immediately said, "I'm Raoul's mother." I was so scared, words can't describe it. To her credit, she didn't give me any hint that she was superior to me, just informed me that Raoul had a fiancée for a long time. It was a very serious relationship, and she thought it was right for me to hear it from her at least if Raoul kept me in the dark. She said she was ashamed that her son was playing with a woman's feelings and apologized for it. The wedding had been planned for 2 years, waiting for the groom to finish his studies. During this time, Raoul hadn't informed either the fiancée or her parents that his intentions had changed, so they planned to gather soon to discuss the date and other wedding details. And as I listened to this lady, I realized she was telling the truth. And again, to her credit, she didn't say any nasty things like, "Please leave my son alone." She must have figured something out about me. I just said like a robot, "Thank you, I understand," and walked into the main area without looking back. She didn't follow me, immediately went outside, also not looking back, as the receptionist told me later. The more Lola talked, the more Emilia felt she knew the characters of the story for sure. But maybe it was just Lola's expressive voice that made it feel that way. When she spoke, you could vividly imagine the people she was talking about. "When did all this happen?" Emilia asked, wanting to dispel the absurd anxiety that seemed to hover over her head. 18 years ago, at the end of July, Lola smiled absently with some gentle bewilderment. What difference does it make? And you never saw him again? Emilia couldn't bring herself to say the protagonist's name. Why not? We did see each other once. I wanted to hear everything from him, from Raoul. He was supposed to pick me up from work, as he often did. When he called in the evening, as always on his way to me, I immediately knew he didn't know about his mother's visit to the salon. And his voice was the same, a bit husky, velvety, affectionate. I was horrified that someone could lie with such a voice. I had met guys before who were very straightforward. They couldn't pretend, they couldn't hide their feelings, or their lack of them. I was sure I'd spot a deceitful guy immediately. Someone like our neighbor Ramiro, who was rude to his wife and sometimes violent, while well-mannered and affectionate people can't be dishonest. Well, that's the kind of mess in my young head. But did he explain anything, or what? Emilia asked with frustration, noticing that she couldn't clearly articulate her thoughts. Or what, meaning sort of, Lola replied with a sad smirk. I immediately laid out all the news for him like a newscaster. His mother came, told me about his fiancée and the wedding plans. I also immediately declared, if he announced today that his fiancée was now me, I'd forgive him and never remind him of his duplicity, and we'd be happy. Emilia, can you imagine how foolish I was? And then my beloved explained, he adored me, I occupied all his thoughts, and he couldn't tell me anything only because he was afraid of losing me. He knew it would come out eventually and couldn't. He repented and used all sorts of exact words I had never heard from him before. And then he explained further, he was still obligated to marry the girl he had promised to marry earlier. Their families had been friends since their student days. She was a very insecure girl, all proper and innocent, and very in love with him. 2 years ago, in front of both families, he had announced his intention to marry her, and now he couldn't back out. I told him it was nonsense, that he should see how we spent our time alone, and he'd see that no one would want to marry him. Sometimes you meet someone else and realize that everything before was not genuine. So, Lola spent another 10 minutes trying to convince Raoul to stop lying to everyone and not marry without love. Only when Raoul confessed that he did love his fiancée in his own way, sort of like family, did Lola feel disgusted, and she didn't want to talk to him about anything anymore, so she left. And a week later, she moved back home. Grandma tried to persuade her to stay, and so did the salon owner. It's a common story, she wasn't pregnant, so just forget it. Basically, all the typical things people say in such cases. But I felt so sick, I couldn't even walk calmly on the streets where I had walked with Raoul. I would walk down the street and feel like sitting down, leaning my back against some house, and howling at the moon like a she-wolf. For about 5 years, I couldn't talk about it calmly. Of course, over time, it all faded away. And what about old love never rusts? Emilia asked quietly. Well, that's probably just a saying, Lola replied with a fleeting smile. When I reconnected with an old friend on social media, we reminisced about various places in the city and people, and that's when I suddenly realized that thinking about that person didn't hurt anymore. On the contrary, I was curious to know where he was, what he was doing, how his life turned out. I wanted to find out. Why, don't even ask, I don't understand it myself. I found him in the friends list on that same friends page and sat down to write a letter. I spent the whole evening struggling. No matter how I wrote it, it ended up sounding like pure nonsense. In the end, I gave up and sent a banal message, "Hi. How are you?" It was even more foolish, of course, but at least in that foolishness, there was nothing personal. And did he reply quickly? Emilia asked. Maybe it would have been smarter not to torture myself with questions, she thought immediately. Stop, Emilia, it's time to stop. She never thought something like this could happen to her. Fateful coincidences were something from other women's lives. For her, Emilia, everything was measured, rational, and calm. When colleagues shared their impressions of their husband's antics, she was always glad she had nothing to report, even if she had wanted to. Not quickly, only by the next evening, Lola admitted. I had already stopped waiting and even started to be glad, telling myself it was for the best. It was a silly idea anyway. And then I opened the message. "Hi, getting a message from you was an unexpected joy." I smirked to myself. Oh, he spent a whole day deciding whether it was a joy or not. It didn't seem like roles had changed much. I laughed to myself, and he, not waiting for a response, wrote again, saying how glad he was that I didn't hold a grudge against him and how he hoped that everything had turned out well for me. I quickly stopped thinking about the content of my messages and briefly explained how things were, living in the same little town, still working in the same hairdressing field, had been married, didn't like it, got divorced, and don't regret it, no children. I mentioned that I was thinking of moving, meaning returning, and suddenly he immediately offered to meet me at the station, have breakfast, and catch up. I agreed without thinking, why not? To be honest, just to confirm that I didn't regret this ended love. In memories from 18 years ago, everything is beautiful and something to miss, if one were to feel like it. But meeting a foolish, boring, self-satisfied man, like so many out there, would make me realize that I hadn't missed out on anything in life. Right? I don't know, Amelia replied with powerless frustration at giving such a vague and uncertain answer. Well, I don't know either, Lola shrugged. Sometimes it's the other way around, as they say, it sweeps you away. And what are you hoping for more? Amelia couldn't help asking, frightened by the question herself. I usually hope for one thing and expect another, Lola said with a sad laugh. We'll see. Yes, it's better not to make predictions, Amelia tried to reply in a similar tone and then added, oh, I'm actually such an early bird, I'm already wanting to sleep. Everyone envies me for getting up early for work without suffering, but I fall asleep first in the evening. While others are just starting their day, I'm already dreaming my 10th dream. Will you be offended if I climb up to my top bunk and open a detective novel to fall asleep? Of course not, you won't offend me, I've already kept you talking too much, Lola generously admitted. Amelia nestled deeper into the cold corner of her top bunk and indeed covered herself with a soft-covered book, the kind that's only good for travel. She mentally congratulated herself for never getting used to reading all sorts of nonsense on an e-reader. Good books that she wanted to reread were lovingly acquired and became part of her home library, while all the one-day wonders she had neither time nor need to read. For rare business trips, she could grab something at the train station kiosk to accompany a bottle of mineral water and a book for the journey. Now she had successfully walled herself off from the outside world with her book and pretended to be absorbed in soothing reading. Moreover, her travel companion below was also leafing through a thick glossy hairdressing magazine, more looking out the window than at the pages. But Lola seemed so sweet, charming, pleasant, welcoming, warm, with her pies, and not for a second did it occur to her to put herself in the shoes of the fiancé of the man she was about to meet. It's probably typical that no one thinks about people like Amelia. It's only at work that diligent adherence to rules is sometimes rewarded. Perhaps that's why Amelia only slightly succeeded in her career, while in life she let others make decisions for her. In her youth, she sometimes dreamed, when she grew up, when she was free from parental control, then. But when that moment came, she had already stopped dreaming. Now Amelia was just lying under a prickly and semi-damp railway blanket, hiding from the world with a book, while the day slowly drifted by, emerging from somewhere very deep in her memory. After all, 18 years had passed. I've long accepted that no one will ever think of you except me. You can't even stand up for yourself, her mother rumbled, throwing shoes and sandals from the shoe shelf onto the floor to pick out a suitable pair. I won't even be able to die in peace when I get tired of living. I'll have to slog on till 150 to not leave you alone here, you helpless mess. Her mother was preparing for a decisive visit to the future in-laws. Just a couple of hours ago, she learned from an ironclad, reliable source that their son Raoul, whom she had almost from childhood planned as a future son-in-law, was seeing some shady girl. It would have been better if he was always seen with different girlfriends. Many young people do that, it's not terrible, but being with the same girl while having an official fiancé is much worse. For Emilia, he buried himself in his studies, started writing his thesis, had no time for anything, while this girl seemed to have free evenings almost every day. How useful it was to have a contact with a chef at a popular local cafe bar, otherwise, they would have remained in ignorance and would never have known the favorite romantic couple of all the bartenders. What outraged Sandra the most wasn't even the betrayal of the fiancé, they are all the same, nothing surprising happened, but her own daughter's reaction. "Mom, if it's true, there's nothing to discuss," Emilia repeated pale-faced, trying very hard to give her trembling voice firmness. "What is there to discuss if the person doesn't love me? Are you suggesting that I demean myself by begging Raoul to marry me? I'm suggesting that you don't let yourself be taken advantage of. Did anyone have to drag him by the tongue when he promised to marry you? I think if you're unsure of your feelings, keep quiet, but if you've assured all the relatives that you're going to marry, then go ahead and marry. Let him be embarrassed that he was caught red-handed, and you have nothing to be ashamed of. You're demanding that a man keep his word. Everyone will approve and support you. Where's the humiliation in that? A bold and direct conversation hasn't humiliated anyone yet. It's not like sneaking hugs in bars. Mom, no conversation will change anything if the person no longer loves me," Emilia stubbornly continued to mumble. "I don't want someone to marry me just to do the right thing. It's been 2 years since our engagement. We both might have changed our minds during that time. But you haven't changed your mind?" Her mother howled again, clutching a stiletto heel in her raised hand. "There's no excuse for him. When he meets someone else and it's serious, then he should just say so, but when he lies to both parties, he loves no one but himself. So why go through all this?" Emilia asked despairingly, tears streaming from her eyes, which she had managed to hold back until these words. "Emilia, why not?" Her mother was even momentarily confused, realizing she had said something excessive in her fervor. "Well, it's time to think like an adult. This is about starting a family, and it's not built on your favorite romance. Most successful marriages only happened because women put in the effort and nudged their partners a little. Yes, the guy might run around for another 5 years figuring out whom he loves and whom he doesn't, or even all 10 years. You might get offended out of principle, proudly leave him, and then he'll break up with this girlfriend in a couple of months and forget about her. And some other girl will come along and turn out to be smarter than you and get a decent fiancé. Emilia, there are fewer and fewer people to start a family with these days. We've known the Diaz family for so many years that we can confidently say they are decent people. Your father and Sandro Diaz have worked together for so many years for a common cause without ever letting each other down. That's the foundation on which to build a family. It's the strongest. And your mother-in-law will be calm, without quirks. That's worth a lot too. Most people only dream of a mother-in-law like Sylvia. She loves you and can't imagine another daughter-in-law besides you, which is a great joy. Anyway, what am I convincing you for when you already know and understand everything? Get dressed, tidy yourself up, and let's go to the Diaz family before Sylvia is home alone." Emilia continued to look at the shoe in her mother's hand and said, without raising her gaze, "I'm not going, Mom. I won't be able to say a word. It'll only make it worse later when I remember how foolish I looked. He promised to marry me. It sounds ridiculous." "Well, then stay here," her mother spat out, put on the first pair of shoes she found, and stormed out of the apartment to seek justice. If Emilia could refuse to go with her mother, trying to stop her mother would have been beyond imagination. Emilia's mother Sandra, unlike Raoul's mother Sylvia, came from a large, simple family where a strong, decisive character was key to survival. Sandra sought to control her own fate and the fate of those in her orbit. Her dreams and aspirations were straightforward, without elaborate fantasies. Having arranged a well-thought-out successful marriage and given birth to a daughter, she turned her attention to arranging her daughter's fate. There was no need to go far for good options. There was a classmate, colleague, and business partner of her husband Sandro from a well-off family for 3 generations, surprisingly decent too. And Sandro had a son, Raoul, balanced and responsible, just like his father. Sandra got to work and quickly organized a family friendship. She even agreed to behave more quietly, trying to emulate the reserved Sylvia, Sandro's wife, clearly raised in different circles where everything is decided by diplomatic cunning rather than bluster. Sylvia did not show any passionate sympathy for Sandra, but she did not refuse to communicate. And most importantly, which was the whole point of it all, Sylvia encouraged the friendship between the children, Raoul and Emilia. Sandra was pleased with her luck. Emilia was nothing like her, but that seemed to work in her favor. She didn't even need to be corrected or persuaded to behave like a good girl. She was born that way, sweet, gentle, patient, and sensible, never upsetting adults. Just a gift, not a girl. The older Emilia got, the stronger Sandra's belief grew that soon they would be related to the Diaz family. Raoul, who was a bit older, had taken care of Emilia since childhood. They could play together for hours and never fought. Raoul was not hot-tempered, and Emilia was accommodating. Hoping for a happy, calm fate for her princess, Sandra enrolled Emilia in a music school. In Sandra's poor and troubled childhood, she saw a girl in a beautiful blue dress playing the piano at a concert in a cultural center, and it became a symbol of fairy tale prosperity for her. Her Emilia should have all that and even more. Children whose parents have long been in contact and even friends often stop communicating when they become teenagers and choose their own company, but Emilia and Raoul did not stop. Moreover, everything fell into place like clockwork. They began dating as a couple. Only one thing worried and upset Sandra, but she kept it to herself, as Sylvia didn't worry about it at all. Emilia really loved Raoul, but he seemed to only allow himself to be loved, continuing to treat Emilia like a younger sister. It's okay, it's not so terrible, Sandra reassured herself. How many families she had seen where everything started with burning male passions, and almost always that boiling cauldron quickly cooled down, or another object of strong passion quickly appeared. If Raoul himself was so calm, it was for the best. Let him love Emilia calmly, like a relative, as long as he cares about her well-being, as his father used to care for his family. That's how it was all going. Sandra even began to superstitiously fear being prematurely joyful. Everything was going too smoothly, as if something might go wrong just before the goal. Whether she foresaw it or jinxed it, it happened. Raoul Diaz had taken up with some uninhibited girl and got carried away, imagining it was the love of his life. Sandra, I've never seen him shine like that next to your daughter, said her friend Tina, who worked as a chef at a trendy cafe bar where Raoul had taken to going in the evenings with his girlfriend, with harsh candor. What's she like, Tina? Sandra asked with a metallic voice. Beautiful, Tina continued harshly. Not perfectly beautiful or like a model, no, just charming, vibrant, even her hair is dyed in 3 colors, very interesting. Guys are drawn to such women. Many people look at her. Even our bartender will confirm that. When we glance into the hall to take a break from work, we all notice. Tina, are you exaggerating? Sandra was determined to hide her anxiety and concern from her envious friend and tried to appear composed. Girls like that from the clubs always have a line of people wanting to spend time with them, but guys usually don't rush to make serious life plans with them. Decent people marry girls like my Emilia. I'm not exaggerating, Tina cut off the silly assumption immediately. I've worked with people for decades, and your decent people marry all kinds of women, believe me. And Raoul's girl is exactly the type for whom people change their minds. She's quite capable of it. I'm not trying to offend you, but to make you think and maybe say something to Emilia. Maybe there's still a chance to save the situation. Sandra shot her friend a disapproving look but remained silent. She's already sure that our luck has run out. She's waiting for the moment to spread the news that Emilia's fiancé dumped her. Sandra firmly and finally decided that the planned wedding would go ahead. She wasn't too upset that Emilia had refused to go with her to the Diaz family. She and Sylvia had had a very successful conversation alone. Sandra, from a brisk, unbeatable woman, transformed into a grieving mother and silently cried in Sylvia's living room, while intermittently telling how desperately unhappy Emilia was. Sylvia's mother didn't shed a tear even out of solidarity. In critical situations, she seemed to freeze from within. She limited herself to promising that she would definitely sort out this misunderstanding, and her voice sounded in such a way that Sandra understood it would be done. And Emilia did marry Roel. Whenever she looked at the wedding photos, she was always surprised at why everyone praised them so much. Couldn't anyone see how sad and bewildered the bride looked? Couldn't they notice that the groom's mind was elsewhere? It was immediately obvious. Or was Mom right, and Emilia was too sensitive? On her wedding day, she couldn't understand why there was no bright joy she had anticipated. Roel behaved impeccably, was affectionate and attentive, but to her, it seemed he was just playing his role perfectly while thinking about something else, and that it would always be this way. As time went on, Emilia's marriage turned out to be better than the wedding day had suggested. This in itself was reassuring. It's too often the other way around. Roel turned out to be the caring husband that Emilia's mother had wanted for her. Everything in their life fell into place as it is expected in a happy family. A year after the wedding, they had a son, Sandro, named after his grandfather and who inherited his love for sports. He's still in competitions. Emilia went on a business trip and Sandro left the next day. Roel stayed home alone. Everything seemed to have worked out just to help and please him. He was probably sitting in his favorite chair, absently looking at his laptop, and imagining how he would meet the friend he couldn't or didn't want to forget over 18 years. At night, Emilia couldn't fall asleep. The train was creaking and rattling as if it were about to fall apart, and Emilia felt empty and broken. Lola slept soundly and serenely on her lower bunk, her long hair splayed out over the pillow and blanket. Medusa Gorgon, Emilia thought without anger, looking at the outline of her traveling companion's head in the light of the station lamps passing by outside the window. It was good that Mom wasn't here now. She would definitely have started working on a precise and infallible plan to expose something that nobody needed. At least Emilia didn't need it. But to avoid endlessly pondering in her head how the meeting between Roel and Lola actually went, she had to decide to see that meeting for herself. Emilia couldn't deny herself this. Without it, she wouldn't know what to expect from life next. The train was due to arrive at the final station by 8 in the morning. A couple of hours before arrival, Emilia managed to brush her teeth, wash up, and freshen up as much as possible on the road, and check if she had forgotten anything in her travel bag. Awakened people were bustling up and down the aisle of their compartment, chatting, grumbling, laughing, sometimes even loudly. It seemed impossible to sleep, but Lola slept quietly until the very last moment when the conscientious conductor went around the carriages to wake the passengers. "Young lady, dear, we're approaching," she announced over the sleeping Lola. Lola opened her eyes a moment later, squinting like a cat, and sleepily said, "Oh, thanks a lot. Good morning, Emilia." Lola sat up in bed for a few minutes like a sleepy pillar, shook her tousled straw-colored head, and pulled a round cosmetics bag from under her pillow. "I'm going to freshen up now and then I'll come to do my makeup." She stretched leisurely, like a lady in her private boudoir, and suddenly jumped up and ran off. Emilia didn't feel like talking at all. The closer they got to home, the more she felt helpless and confused. Emilia was most afraid of accidentally giving herself away, that Lola would realize she had been too open with her. And Lola suddenly remembered. "Oh, is anyone picking you up? If not, we can drop you off at home, it's not far." No, Emilia shook her head almost in fright. "I'll wait for my son. He promised to meet me, but he won't make it right to the train. He can come a bit later, in about 10 minutes. So I'll skip all the rushing passengers and calmly leave the carriage last." Emilia suddenly tried to imagine Roel's expression if he saw his wife and Lola walking towards him, chatting sweetly together. She might have wanted to see it, but then she wouldn't get to see how those two would meet without her. Emilia glanced quickly at her reflection in the compartment door mirror. It must be obvious that something was wrong with her. But Lola seemed preoccupied with her own thoughts and was oddly indifferent to the appearance of her traveling companion. Emilia expected Lola to be carefully grooming herself if the meeting was important to her, but Lola merely touched up her eyes and lips and looked at herself in the mirror with a thoughtful but satisfied expression. It was clear she wasn't worried in the slightest. Emilia felt a pang of sad envy. Before important meetings, she always felt she looked worse than usual, tired and unkempt. Lola, apparently, didn't worry about such things at all. "Are you sure you don't need a ride home?" Lola asked again as the station platform outside the compartment window became slower and slower and a line of particularly hurried passengers with luggage formed in the corridor. "Well, thank you for the pleasant journey and the nice conversation. Maybe we'll see each other again." "I'd be happy." "Oh, I've kept you chatting all evening, Emilia, but I forgot to mention, the beauty salon where I'll be working is called Aquamarine. Come by if you ever want to switch hairdressers. Bye for now. Good luck." Lola grabbed her maneuverable suitcase on wheels, slipped out of the compartment, and joined the line to exit. Emilia stayed behind, clutching the handles of her travel bag, ready to dart out at any moment. The time between the farewell and Lola stepping onto the platform and heading towards the city seemed like hours, longer than the entire journey. Emilia dashed out of the compartment, trying not to look at the remaining fellow travelers and squeezing between them, hurrying to the exit. "Excuse me." "Sorry. I'm in a hurry." "Sorry," she muttered. A surprising thought suddenly came to her mind. She had never had to push or even ask anyone to let her through. Someone tried to grumble about being in a hurry too, but she didn't care. How nice that Lola had a bright fuchsia windbreaker, visible from a distance and helping her keep track of her figure. Soon, Emilia nearly caught up with her and kept a safe distance of several meters. It became increasingly clear that they were heading to the station's parking area. Roel was supposed to wait for his wife Emilia there after her business trip of 2 days. And now he would be meeting his wife if she had informed him she was coming back today. It's hard to believe in fate and mysticism after this. Emilia had known nothing about any Lola. She had simply decided not to say she would arrive earlier to surprise her husband. Roel would come home from work in the evening, and on the table would be a bottle of champagne and his favorite lamb roast. Now, as Emilia watched Lola's relaxed fuchsia back, her surprise seemed boring and flat. She didn't even want to imagine how it would seem to Roel, who was looking forward to meeting the woman he had rejected 18 years ago. The station square with the parking lot was clearly visible from the high station stairs. Probably the same in the reverse direction. Just in time to spot her husband's silver car and Roel himself next to it, Emilia managed to duck behind a column. Roel was leaning over the car, wiping the already gleaming glass. Usually, he only took the car to the wash after long trips in bad weather or after a reminder from his wife that it was time. But today, the car stood out among the others in the parking lot, and Emilia didn't immediately realize why. It sparkled with cleanliness, as if it were going to a parade. While Emilia rejoiced at remaining unnoticed, Roel suddenly straightened up and froze, seeing someone. Then he opened the car door, swiftly grabbed a bouquet of dark red roses from the front seat, and walked towards someone. Emilia had learned over the years of marriage what his swift, uneven gait meant. It happened extremely rarely and meant that the usually balanced Roel was very excited. So excited that his feigned composure was leaving him. The figure in the fuchsia windbreaker was approaching him, not quickening her pace, and he was almost running, barely holding himself back from breaking into a run. Emilia wanted most of all to turn around and go in the opposite direction, but she forced herself to keep watching. She saw the two of them meet and how Roel, hesitating to take the last couple of steps, offered Lola the bouquet, while she stood in front of him in a mockingly playful pose, hands on her hips, looking him in the face. Emilia seemed to see her friendly, mocking smile, even though Lola was facing away from her. Roel looked bewildered, almost smaller, shorter, and narrower in the shoulders. A light, short laugh from Lola reached Emilia. Or maybe she just imagined it, there were so many sounds. Lola took the bouquet from Roel, brushed the rose petals against her cheek, and then suddenly hugged Roel around the neck with one arm and, standing on tiptoe, kissed him on the cheek. while Roll embraced her carefully and tenderly around the waist with both arms and for a moment buried his face in Lola's straw-colored hair as if he was apologizing for something. Emilia clearly realized that she could come out from behind the column. He wouldn't notice anyone else now. She could easily and unobtrusively take a few photos with her phone to show her husband in the evening, but for some reason, she didn't do that. The three of them knew everything already, and who else needed to know? Lola slightly moved away from Emilia's husband, first deftly smoothing a stray lock of hair from his temple, and started talking to him animatedly while he listened and nodded, not once looking around, only at her. Emilia, without even realizing it, had indeed left her hiding place behind the column and was simply standing in the middle of the station stairs, watching as her husband and travel companion walked to the car, settled in, and drove away. She also needed to go somewhere. She was cold, her bag was pulling on her arm and shoulder, and she wanted to sleep and cry. It wasn't clear in which order, but continuously. But where to go? To her mother's? No, that would be the worst idea. She should be managing her own affairs and troubles by now, otherwise, her life would pass according to someone else's script. With no plan, Emilia simply went home. When you can't see a way out of a situation, it's probably best to stick to familiar surroundings and routine tasks. It had always helped her in the past, so it should work now. Her own thoughts felt like a labyrinth. She couldn't answer herself what she was waiting for more or what she was afraid of more. How to talk to Raoul when he comes home? What if he doesn't come home at all today? After all, he thinks there's no one to check. Judging by the meeting Emilia saw with her own eyes, no scenario could be ruled out. She had to face the truth. Her travel companion wasn't making anything up about herself and Emilia's husband. Emilia had no idea how people who had a brief, pleasant affair meet almost 20 years later, but it certainly wasn't like this. Or was it just her, as usual, seeing what wasn't there? It was impossible to fall asleep, and if she kept pacing around the room like a caged tigress, she might go mad. Emilia walked to the market, bought some groceries, and made the roast as planned. She had to do something, and she needed to eat too. Roll came home in the evening at his usual time, found her in the kitchen, was slightly surprised, but not visibly upset, sniffed the air, and said, "Roast. Great that you came back early. Did everything go well? Can I congratulate you?" "Yes, everything went according to plan," Emilia replied, pleasantly noting, look, she was speaking in her usual voice, and it wasn't difficult at all. "There's nothing to congratulate just yet. The results will come later. Then just welcome back." Roll approached, gave her a peck on the cheek, as usual, and sat down at the table to wait for dinner. He didn't seem to have spent the day, or even part of it, away from work. If she hadn't seen him this morning, she would never have suspected he had met another woman. 18 years ago, when he chose Emilia, she had gratefully settled down and for some reason imagined it would last forever. Isn't it funny that at her age she managed to remain so naive? It's surprising that life only now rewarded her with a slap in the face. Serves her right. She should have refused to marry him back then. Maybe then someone would be giving her roses and hiding their face in her hair now. Even if not, there would still be something else, something good, instead of this calm hypocrisy she was experiencing now. Emilia still didn't dare to talk openly with her husband. She first postponed it until the weekend, since it wasn't appropriate to return from a business trip in such a disheveled state, and then Sandro came back from his hockey match. His team had won, and ruining his celebration was completely unnecessary. Thus, the weeks passed. Each day it became harder to summon the courage for an honest conversation. Emilia clearly understood she wouldn't be able to do it unless Roll started first. After all, she had lived like this for all these years, so nothing new. Every evening, she observed her husband's behavior and saw no changes. If she hadn't finished her business trip early and returned home on that train, in that compartment, she would have considered her life prosperous and even happy. So if she still had no desire or strength to change her life, she should simply forget what happened as a dream. It didn't seem like Roll would start treating the family any differently, and for a coward like her, who agreed to become an unloved wife, that should be enough. Before the new year, Sandro announced he was going to celebrate with his hockey team friends. Emilia and Roll then decided they didn't want to be alone in the apartment, so they went to celebrate the new year at Roll's parents, the Diaz seniors. Emilia was genuinely happy. It was indeed a bit empty alone, but with her friendly father-in-law and loving mother-in-law, they made a warm family clan. They welcomed the new year until the early hours. Only at around 3 a.m. did Emilia and her mother-in-law go to bed, while Roll and his father, having gotten involved in topics only they were interested in, said they would stay up a bit longer. Emilia went to the warm, cozy little room where she and Roll always stayed when visiting his family. She looked briefly at the huge snowflakes outside the window and quickly fell asleep, only to wake up and find herself still alone. Her phone showed it was 7 o'clock, and Roll was nowhere to be seen. He rarely drank more than his usual amount and could hardly have fallen asleep in the guest room. Wrapped in a warm blanket, Emilia left the bedroom and headed to the stairs leading down to the living room. The closer she got, the clearer she could hear the quiet voices from below. Yes, it was definitely Roll and Sandro, and they were having a rather serious conversation. If she listened carefully, she could make out every word. The last phrase she heard made Emilia sit down on a step. Her husband Roll was speaking. "Father, I understand intellectually that you're right, that it's for the best, that a family like mine should be valued and not destroyed. I'm not going to. But that's now. Back then, it could have happened if she had only said yes. She just forgave and said no, you don't know her, she really did forgive if she said so, she has no reason to lie. She's glad she had it, but she realized she hadn't loved me for a long time when she met me after 18 years. And I, believe it or not, realized that those years seemed like they never happened as soon as I saw her. I should have married her then. Not listen to anyone, just go away, anywhere, as long as it was with her. And I thought, maybe it's not too late, there are thousands of examples of people starting over, even older than me. But she doesn't love me anymore. And it's fair because cowardice has to be paid for. So I will pay. This is the last time we talk about this, only because you wanted it and because it's New Year's. It's my own business, it won't affect anyone else. It definitely won't affect the family. I have things to do and people to care about. The rest is my business. It will pass." Sandro replied with something likely wise and comforting, which he was good at, but Emilia didn't listen further. She quietly stood up, trying not to fall down the stairs while tangled in the blanket, and returned to the room. On the third day of the new year, when the beauty salon Aquamarine reopened after the holiday, Emilia went there toward the end of the working day. Through the glass wall separating the reception area from the client zone, she saw two young women finishing cleaning their workspaces. "Would you like to make an appointment?" the receptionist asked pleasantly. "No, I'm here to see Lola." "Is she working today?" "Yes, she hasn't left yet." "I'll call her." The receptionist stepped out from behind the counter, went to the entrance of the hall, and melodiously called out, "Dolores, you have a visitor. Are you coming soon?" I'm coming," responded the familiar voice Emilia had heard, and a minute later, Lola was at the receptionist's desk. Her straw-colored hair now had dark honey streaks, which suited her very well. She looked pleased with life and even seemed younger to Emilia than she did on the train. "Hello, Emilia, how are you?" she asked warmly. "Thank you for deciding to come by. We're doing well here. I just wanted to talk, so I came close to closing time," Emilia began to explain quickly, just to avoid silence. "Do you have a minute for a coffee? There's a cafe not far from here." "Of course, there's a nice cafe called Plot," Lola confirmed. "Let's go." As soon as she said this, Emilia realized Lola knew who Emilia's husband was. The assumption turned out to be true. "Do you want to talk about Roll?" Lola asked as soon as they stepped outside. Her calm, completely non-hostile voice helped Emilia find her words. Yes. It turns out that I am his wife, the one he was once made, or persuaded, to marry. It doesn't really matter anymore. Now, it's not even worth saying that I'm to blame for agreeing to marry someone who wanted another. Maybe it's a silly idea, but I wanted to let you know that I'm planning to leave Raul. So, if the only thing that was stopping you was that he's married and you might face troubles again, there will be no troubles. You can be with him if you want. He really wants to be with you. I heard it myself and I'm sure of it. Emilia, Lola gently took her by the elbow and didn't want to let go. We met only 3 times after my arrival and nothing happened between us. We just wandered around, talked, and had coffee. I realized on the first day that Raul was just a warm memory for me. Even before I asked him to show me family photos. When I saw that you were you, I felt a bit uneasy. It happens. By the way, Raul loves his family very much and thinks he's lucky to have you. Those are his words. So, if I were you, I'd try to stay together. Sorry for being forward. And I recently met someone else who is also free. It seems serious, but I won't rush things. I'll say something silly now. If you want, make an appointment with me. We can make ourselves beautiful and talk about our personal matters. The effect of a random travel companion? Emilia asked. Yes, Lola smiled.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.